11/23/19, a surreal day in the neighborhood. I would have liked A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood better if it was directed by Bob Fosse or Louis Buñuel. The film has some surrealistic touches, but it would have packed more punch if it had a little hair of the Andalusian dog, or at least a taste of all that jazz. I start this piece with a quibble. You don't expect exquisite fare when you go to Applebee's or the local multiplex. Some might argue that hardcore surrealism has nothing to do with Mr. Rogers, and that a gentle Technicolor offering that looks like almost every other movie that you'll see this year suits him fine. Mainstream with a difference. But A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood isn't about Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers defines his vocation in the film. His mission was to help children, and by extension adults too, deal with their feelings in positive ways. Dealing with feelings is akin to dream interpretation, only much more common and important. The film makes the point that it isn't about Mr. Rogers, and in a related matter, that there are no saints or heroes. Those are profound, if common, observations, and I appreciated hearing them. My experience watching the movie was similar to having a conversation with a well-meaning, insightful, and somewhat boring individual. I appreciate where they direct my attention, and I'm warmed by their hospitality, but I have to go further than they do in order to really learn anything. The hero of A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is writing. An Esquire writer who is extremely angry with his father is assigned a profile of Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers engages the angry, not-so-young man in what at first seems a therapeutic way, but is actually more of a pastoral one. Mr. Rogers, the writer, and an invisible God share the screen. Buñuel or Fosse would have made God visible. A writer writes to burn out pain, his own and the pain of others. The writer is redeemed from his anger and brought to a place of forgiveness born of understanding through writing about his connection with Mr. Rogers to work through his problems. And Mr. Rogers feels better about his anger because as a wounded healer, he uses his hospitality for troubled people to relieve his own pain and theirs simultaneously. Dealing with one's feelings, particularly anger and sadness, is a surreal experience. Anger and sadness are intense. They paradoxically make all of the tiny details of a moment hyper-real and also distort reality into an overwhelming, malevolent threat to our very existence. My mantra, cited on these pages often: experience, observe, reflect, apply. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood goes through these four phases of writing, decision-making, and living, and I thank the filmmakers for making that available to everyone. But there is much more to be said on the movie's themes. The movie is trapped in marketing. It could have been less popular and more honest in another universe where Adam and Eve never ate the apple and money was never invented. There are many kinds of anger, and the movie implies one size of anger fits all, keeping things simple for the masses. The Esquire writer had a father who cheated on his mother when she was dying, and then abandoned his children. The writer had an understandable disgust for humanity as a result. The father seeks forgiveness before he himself will die. Mr. Rogers tells the writer we get most angry at those we love, and that the father had as much to do with what was good about the writer as the easier to love good mom. The writer does the right thing, and they live and die happily ever after. That is valid, and understanding and forgiveness are necessary to let go of even more horrendous pain and abuse than the writer suffered. But the anger and sadness related to the more horrendous rages and sorrows of life are more often not resolved in deathbed confessions and pleas for forgiveness. The resolution of pain related to something like a father's child molestation, for example, happen when the hurt party is alone. There is no celebration. There are no family Christmas photos with the old man on his deathbed, surrounded by his noble and adoring family. There are also many more shades of anger than the movie describes. The Esquire writer has the anger of conflict. He wants to love his father. He wants his father to be better than what he was. He wants a happier history for himself. He gets his wish in the film. That's not false. It happens. But the story becomes dangerously sentimental when it is sold as a universal one. There is also the anger of insult. Feeling insulted is a demand to be treated with dignity and respect. It's a good anger, a hot and clean thing. It sets a boundary. It only becomes a problem when it is not transcended. Sometimes the hurtful person is what must be let go. There is the anger of feeling forced to do or say something that you don't believe in. This anger leads to integrity. If maintained beyond separation and new direction, it leads to conflict. All transformation involves breaking and tearing and pain. It requires leaving behind people and ways of being that prevent one from living out the truth of their destiny. I was feeling quite self-actualized yesterday. I felt like I had it all together. I had let go of all toxic relationships and situations that had bedeviled me in my past lives. I knew who I could love effectively and who was beyond my power. I was filled with a passion to connect and expand any positive influence that I might be positioned to bring into the world. I chart the course of my life like an explorer in my writing. And then someone that I love very much told me a story which ostensibly had nothing to do with me. She had coffee with a former work colleague who was being forced out of his job by venal bosses who had previously abused her in the same way. She had talked to me at great length about these mean and petty people when they tormented her. I was very proud of how she dealt with these bastards. She got an employment lawyer and protected herself. She fought through the temptation to internalize their emotionally abusive, disrespectful comments and behavior. She got another job surrounded by nice people whose work was guided by values other than greed. I thought mention of these creeps was over. I had forgiven them. I don't have a problem with anyone that me and those I love are not dealing with. Let the dead bury their own dead. I can't do anything for these people. I only have hospitality for them if they ask for forgiveness and pursue love, like the Esquire writer's father. But most often, that doesn't happen. Criminals belong in jail. Assholes deserve to be iced. Love is a two-way street. People may not love for many reasons. I don't judge their immortal souls, and I do believe in redemptions. But I also believe that toxic people, places, and things have to be avoided at all costs. Nothing good comes with tolerance of toxicity. I was with the person I love as she recounted her meeting with her suffering friend until she started analyzing his oppressor's actions and motivations. And then I hit the roof. It was surreal. And I'm not sorry. I want nothing to do with the devil's thought processes. Years ago, I tried to maintain working and other relationships with people like my beloved's ex-employers. Then I learned to tell them to fuck off, and I left. I love them like I love the angry guy locking himself and thrusting me in the rearview mirror. I hope he doesn't get into an accident, but he most likely will, killing himself and other people. Oh, he turned off. Good. I'm through with him. Mr. Rogers believed that there is good in everyone. I do too, but I don't think it's always accessible. A samurai warrior never strikes a foe in anger. He defends himself without anger. He uses evasive tactics without anger. He retreats without anger. A samurai accepts that people sometimes choose bad, and life in the world requires dealing with it. But I am glad I got angry with my love last night, because even samurais get pissed off. I don't care what they say. I can be calm and enlightened now when I'm writing. But last night's temper tantrum was a surreal moment, fueled by fears of backsliding and distraction from my and my love's proper course. It was terrifying to see those grotesque people enter our lives when we are just at the moment of liberation from their abuse. Mr. Rogers and Jesus turned the other cheek. They loved their enemies, but they also stood up to their enemies and didn't let their enemies distract them from their holy missions. Forgive, yes. Love your enemies, yes. But sincerity towards disintegrating influences is dangerous. I want to die for what is important to me, not be destroyed to satisfy the meaningless purpose of an abuser. Copyright 2019, Richard Thomas.